it started coming down, faster and faster. Then it slowed down, and then it leveled off, and then it immediately started coming over our vehicle. And it was at this time it was really close and massive. And so it was um, that was a moment of like, what in the F is this? And I rolled my window down. The vehicle was off. I was listening for sound. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't anything observed, that I've observed ever. It was one of those that I locked all the doors, shut all the windows, and mentally made a threat that if you come in, that things were going to get very violent. I was going to protect my family no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take us back and kind of share with us what happened.
So yeah, it was June 29th, 2015. We had left our town that we were living in, all packed up. We had gone to a gas station so that I could weigh my trailer. During this, what we call, PCS moves, this is called a permanent change of station move. At those times, you collect receipts for food that you purchase, gasoline purchases, hotel expenses, things that you're needing along your route, so that you can claim to be reimbursed for that money when you return. So ironically, I had a very well suited, envelope full of receipts justifying every single stop that I've made on my trip from point A to point B. Kind of surprising that I had a paper trail following my route, exactly as it happened. And I think that kind of worked out as like a godsend. It worked out perfectly. So yeah, we left just after sundown. After we wanted to make that trip in the evening time, because I had my dogs in the back bed of my truck, had a topper, and had beds in there for them, some water and things like that that wouldn't slosh around too much. And it was going to be easier, moving with them, instead of the heat, the sun beating on them
Mhm.
all day. I'd rather do it in the evening time where it's cooler and they could snuggle up together on their little, their dog bed or whatever, and stay, relatively comfortable and warm, and less traffic, less noise. And so we went right after sundown. So I would have imagined it was somewhere in the realm of, between 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. perhaps.
Mhm.
And so we got on our route, and within like an hour and a half to 2 hours, we should have been in Dallas, or yeah, not Dallas, Atlanta. But somehow we got off course. Um, we had stopped one place before we had gotten off course, at a gas station, to grab something to sip on. I believe I wanted a coffee or something. And then we got back on the road. So it was a short stop. And then somehow we got sidetracked, and we were taken off the highway onto another highway. It's called Highway 1, going toward Wadley, the area of Wadley, Georgia. And it was on that four-lane, divided highway route that um, we started going into some dense fog, and I noticed some power surges in my truck. The dash lights were dimming, or they're getting really bright. And my wife was noticing my headlights were getting bright, and she's like, "Are you messing with your bright beams?" I was like, "No, I'm not." The headlights were malfunctioning. The radio lost signal, so she changed it to we had satellite radio, satellite XM, so we didn't have to deal with the static anymore. And then all of a sudden that went out, and so she just turned everything, the radio and everything off at that point, because we couldn't listen to anything. Everything was messing up. And so I was beginning to think that we were having an electrical issue in the vehicle. But we kept on going. And I was going to look for, a gas station to stop at, and lift the hood and take a look at the electrical system later. But as we were moving down the road, she spotted something in the sky that started getting brighter and brighter. And it was off to our north, our from the position of our vehicle, it would have been off to the left, the upper left side, on the driver's side. She pointed at it, and she's like, "What in the hell is that?" And, those weren't her exact words, but you know, we can let our imagination flow with that one. But I looked up and I said, I don't know what the that is, and you could use your imagination there as well. But you know, we were in shock. I saw it and I was like, oh, I think that's possibly an airplane, and it's coming down towards this highway. It probably sees that's probably making an emergency landing. But I said I don't know if it's an airplane. I'm not seeing the you know, the red and green, you know, lights for the, you know, marking the wingtips. You know, because one side, you know, red is marking the pilot side, and the green side's marking the co-pilot side. Um, and then there's usually a strobe in the back. You know, I'm not seeing any of those identifiers. I'm just seeing a bright light coming down toward us. And so I was thinking in my head, okay, well, if it's got its landing lights on, then I might not be able to see the strobes, but I certainly don't want to be in its path when it's going to make an emergency landing here. So I pulled the vehicle to the side of the road and stopped and turned the truck off. You know, I left a key on, so I had electricity in the vehicle, and you know, and just kind of waited, and it started coming down, you know, faster and faster. Then it slowed down, and then it leveled off, and then it immediately started coming over our vehicle. And it was at this time it was really close and massive, and so it was um, that was a moment of like, what in the F is this? And I rolled my window down. The vehicle was off. I was listening for sound. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything observed, you know, that I've observed ever. And then it had, you know, strange symbology underneath side. I sent you a picture
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. We'll post that.
to
Uh,
display that. So this was something you know, as a trained observer, you've never seen before. And you're looking for appendages. You're looking for characteristics that you can classify this as, and it doesn't match anything. I mean, you know, I had tons of different thoughts going in my head. It was moving too fast to be a blimp. I mean, this was moving really fast, and then it stopped, and then it was slowly hovering over. No sound besides some humming, some mild electronic humming, or some um, mild noise from it. And it hovered over for just a matter of a minute or two. I think the whole encounter lasted maybe 5 minutes. And then, you know, it moved off to the um, northeastern direction, and then pivoted directly east in an upward angle, in other words, increasing in out. And then it just, zip, it was just gone, like right through the clouds. It left a hole through the clouds where it punched right through. And we were like, what in the hell was that? And so I was just quiet. I was trying to, you know, put all the pieces together that I just witnessed. You know, it had like, it looked like it had like a field around it that you could very minutely make out. There was
like a field, like a light field or a energy field or
it was like a bubble. It was like a bubble. You know, it was like a bubble around it, like a almost transparent bubble. That it just threw, yeah, it's very difficult to explain. The best way I could do it is just we drew pictures of it later on, and
and you said
we did our,
massive. Yeah, you said
yeah, it
massive.
was massive.
How can you like a Walmart
Rough.
size or
So take a football field and double it. I would say it's close to that size. Um,
wow.
you know, judging
Yeah.
it,
And you're
it was
seeing
a
these
little over.
markings. Yeah, were there
Yeah,
lights on it?
there were lights in the center around its axis, the center, you know, or the equator of it. I would say there were small. You know, I wouldn't say round, I wouldn't say rectangular, but a combination of the two, like
Mhm.
lights around the equator of of this vessel. It had also like a plasma, like a multicolored plasma that was kind of moving and forming around it as well. But you can see that, you know, it was just enough where you can see that it was made like of aluminum or some sort of shiny, not super shiny, but like this dull metal, grayish, very light grayish metal. And then that's underneath side is where you could see those symbology that was underneath it that
Mhm.
I couldn't recognize as well.
And the
So
plasma that, what were the colors of the plasma that you were kind of, was it like oil? Was it
yeah.
swirling around like oil or?
If you dropped a few drops of oil in a puddle of water and then turned where the light would hit it and the sun hit it, that multicolored glow that it has, it was like reds, purples, greens, yellows, oranges. It was multicolored. Just it was kind of like a hazy plasma moving all over it. And different and a different form or whatnot. It's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
And then the lights that were coming off, that were, I guess you would call them headlights, if there were headlights. They weren't attached to the object itself. They were detached. So it was coming from the field. So you had the object here, the light was, it was off. It was over here, not connected. And it was coming from that almost transparent field that was around it.
Mm.
um, we saw some electricity style, static electricity or sparking coming from the back end of it, where the bubble, the field that was around it was creating some sort of electrical discharge at some point when it was moving in a specific direction that I noticed, and everything kind of moved in that way. Um, it's difficult to describe verbally, but it was easier for me to just sketch it
Mhm.
out, and I did the best I could sketching out. But now with AI, you can create exactly what you're seeing, with limited or a lot less work involving in it. But
So it's go this huge 2 football size field. It's kind of a football shape. Is that the right
right.
shape? Moving over your truck for 5 minutes and then taking off up through the clouds in like an instant.
Yeah, it was gone very quickly.
And did it
And I
just,
wouldn't I wouldn't I wouldn't say it was directly over my truck. It was kind of like over the hood and further in front of us because we were leaning forward and looking up through our windshield
wow,
um, at it. We were leaning forward over our dash to see what we were seeing. And I had my head out the window a couple of times. I stuck my whole head out the window, was looking up at it and
no
listening for
radiation
things. And
burns like in Close Encounters or anything like that from, Richard Dreyfuss's face gets burned on one side. Never mind. So nothing like that happened, huh?
it's funny you say that, but no radiation burns. But for over 20 years, I deal with RF radiation. Surprising.
Hmm.
No radiation burns. I
Hmm.
don't know.
Interesting. And so you're just kind of left there. It's gone. Are you just left there in silence? Is that, you've had that hum, you've had that like there, and it's just gone in an instant. What was that like?
So we were just looking at where it had disappeared from, and she's still looking. And I think I was the one that broke the silence, and I was like, "Well, that was interesting. Let's get down the road. Let's not stay here. Don't want to stay here much." And so I cranked it up and went down the road, and she was just like, "What in the hell was that?" And so we must have only driven about, I want to say, and this is a guesstimation because I don't quite exactly remember exactly precisely where, but I want to say anywhere between 4 and 7 more miles down the road before we stopped at the Wadley Shake Rag Express gas station. And I still remember that. Isn't that weird? But yeah, we stopped there, and when we got out of the truck, that's when we started to realize that our bodies were feeling very off, like if we had been in that cab of that truck for over 24 hours or a long period of time, where it was like our legs were not ready to support our weight, underneath them.
Hmm.
Things felt really off, and she identified that right away. As I was thinking that, I was like, "What in the hell is wrong with me? Why do I feel out of shape all of a sudden and um, burnt out and exhausted? Why am I feeling that way? We've only been in the truck for, I want to say 30, 45 minutes. That doesn't wear me out. And she pointed out and was like, I feel really off. And I was like, I know, I'm feeling the same thing. And so we went around to the front of the truck and we were just kind of like stretching and thinking that, something just felt off with us. And so at that point we went in and grabbed a few things and she went to the restroom. And then we paid for our stuff. And as we were coming out, people were talking about, oh, did y'all see that meteorite? And I was like, what meteorite? And it was like, it's right out there. You can see it right now. And I went out there and there was something further out, way further out. And it looked like something burning. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And we noticed it. We were watching it too. And I was thinking, that's not a meteor. That's moving too slow. I know what meteorites look like. And I wasn't sold that that was a meteorite because meteorites move at a higher rate of speed than what we were observing. But I did spot something, and then more people showed up, and they were like, "Oh, there was something in the sky," and I was like, "Yeah, there were some things." And so at that time, we were like, "All right, it's time for us to go." I don't want to describe what we just saw because I don't want to be bugged and sitting there all night long talking about it. We had a long way to go, and we just started our trip, and I didn't want to get held up at that time. So kept our receipts, continued on, and it wasn't but I don't know, about 15 more miles up the road that we realized we got way off course somehow, and GPS took us way off course. It said we were at our final destination. It said, "Welcome to Colorado Springs, Colorado," and it took us to like this isolated road on the hilltop right near a church. The closest thing to us was a church, but it was at the top of this hill, the very tip top of this hill. Roughly on the side of the road, we were at our final destination. I was like, no, we're not. And so I'm pulling up my phone and Google Maps, and we're right there, just outside of Wadley, Georgia, on this hilltop. And it was like, there's no way this is Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was like,
That's wild.
something messed up our GPS. And so I had to shut off and reprogram the GPS. Then we put it on our phones and we bumped, our phone maps with our GPS. And I had to backtrack, get back on course. And then we finally got, just north of Dallas. I keep saying Dallas, just north of Atlanta before we finally stopped. And it was like 10 a.m. in the morning. It was way, way later. So we had missing time. We had, yeah, it was rough, and I didn't sleep very well. Um, I recall not sleeping hardly at all. I remember closing my eyes and trying to get some rest. I remember the kids jumping on us. I remember, our animals trying to play on us and stuff. So I didn't sleep very well. And then, but I got rested enough where I was able to rest my body. And then I chugged some coffee and like a big 32-ounce freaking
Hmm.
mug thing, that I bought along the way and was like, I'm gonna fill this 32-ounce thing full of coffee and I'm gonna be good to go. You know,
So you mentioned missing time. How much missing time did you all have?
Based on the last receipt before the encounter, it looks as though we had roughly three hours. I would say roughly 3.5 hours of missing time.
Wow. And the detour that you took couldn't have accounted for 3 hours.
No, because once again, we had the receipt, 4 to 7 miles after the incident occurred, and we had the receipt, miles back, beforehand. So you're going off of the receipt times, and
Hmm.
and the missing time occurred, between those two stops.
So
Ironically,
during the encounter.
right when the encounter happened. Yeah,
Yeah. So you
yeah,
mentioned that your wife kind of had ontological shock after that.
yeah. It definitely shook her in a way that made her suddenly realize that what she didn't believe before, she certainly believes now. Um, people go through these things. I mean, there are people who don't believe that places are haunted, and then when they visit a place and they realize that there's a spiritual presence there, able to move things around, slam doors, and you're able to catch voice recordings, audio, or see things happen in those rooms, it definitely shakes your core and makes you realize that what you didn't believe before, now you're able to verify, firsthand. And so, yeah, it does kind of shake things up in your mind a little bit. And
Do
so
you
I
think
think
it
she's definitely
was,
encountered that.
yeah, was it the encounter itself or was it what happened afterwards? So the second night you woke up.
Yeah, the second night I woke up and we were in Paducah, Kentucky. I love that name because it just sounds very Paducah-ish. But it was in Paducah, Kentucky. It was at a, simple Motel 6 along our route. Um, we had gotten there in plenty of time because I was burnt out, exhausted, ready for sleep because I didn't sleep hardly at all the first night. And there was a lot of things going through my head and the animals and the kids and they had slept in the truck while we were driving the whole time, so they were wired and it was just rough for me. And so when we got to that second stop, that's where I crashed hard in Paducah, Kentucky.
To say that 10
And
times fast. Just kidding.
yeah, say it fast, man. So yeah, it was one of those moments that, my body was shutting down. I was crashing hard. I was sleeping well. If she's rested enough, she can deal with the kids, that kind of thing. But, everyone surprisingly wanted to get some rest. And it was in the evening. So it was around the time the kids would, get tired and sleepy. And so I chose that because I needed some sleep. If I stopped during the day to sleep, the kids are going to be keeping me awake. So it was like I had to burn through some and stop when it's still dark out so I can get some rest. Um, and so I guess during that time, I don't recall getting up out of bed and walking into the bathroom. And I grabbed the hotel receipt and the pen that they left me. They had a pen up on there's a little table by the door that I put the receipt in the hotel receipt and my wife had her purse up there, had my wallet up there, but it was the pen that they gave us, to sign things and fill out the, how's your stay card kind of thing. And so I had grabbed that pen and that hotel receipt, flipped that hotel receipt over, and just started writing down these boxes and lines. And that's when I recall actually being in there. I recall writing down these boxes and lines. But I had a hard time keeping up with, how fast they were being shown to me. And I clearly remember them. Some of the boxes were filled in and some of the boxes were empty. And then some of the lines were just a thin line and some of the lines were a thicker line. And so they were coming in so fast, I couldn't keep up with filling in the boxes and making the lines thick. I just had to get them down just for what I was seeing them. If it was a box, I was going to do a box, no matter if it was filled in or not. If it was a line, I was going to do a line. Didn't matter if it was thick or thin. I just needed to get, for some reason, I needed to get it down. So I got it down. I wrote it down. And then I looked at it and I was like, what in the hell did I just put down? And that's when I realized I was in the bathroom and I was like, I need to go back to sleep. I need rest. I've got more driving to do, a lot more driving to do. And so I didn't think much of it. I just put it in a folder, whenever we were packing up and we are leaving and put it with my receipts like everything else. And we continued on. When I got to Colorado Springs, Colorado, I was still having these moments where I was seeing these boxes of lines, but they were starting to slow down enough where I could fill the boxes in and make some of the lines thicker than the others. And it ended up being like 4 characters that I was able to actually start writing down and keeping a little journal of what I was encountering when I was in my sleep. And that was, Linda Moulton Howe helping me create the journal. I was writing stuff down, but I wasn't creating a journal of it. And so she convinced me to create a journal and start writing things down and filling in those boxes and lines that I was getting. So yeah, that's how I did it
Mhm.
in this
And
journal.
and this was kind of like
Yeah.
another, do you want to open them up and show us one of
Uh,
the
yeah, I can
messages?
show you some. I can show you some. I've done this before a few times. If I can find them in here. Well, yeah, here's some where I see imagery and I'm drawing things as I see them. Let me get in here. So, but these are generally how I was getting them in my sleep. I don't know if you can see that well enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. And these turned out to be some kind of new binary. Is that
Uh,
what you were able to find
yeah,
out?
I wasn't sure what they were. Linda Moulton Howe had mentioned that it looks similar to binary code, and I had to look up binary code. I had to do like a search on binary code and how that looked. And I noticed that binary code is zeros and ones. And yeah, you can assume that the lines can, that could be a one, but I wasn't doing circles. And why wasn't I doing circles? Why was I doing boxes? Why was I seeing boxes? So for me, if I see a box, I'm going to draw a box. If I see a line, I'm going to draw a line. I'm not going to assume or manipulate that imagery. In other words, what I see is what I'm putting down. I'm not going to alter it or change it because I'm assuming it's something else, because that's how we get a loss of information. And so the best way to articulate that or to accurately convey that is by duplicating exactly what you're seeing or what you're encountering, what you're witnessing, and not manipulating or changing that information because you're assuming it's something else. And so I did boxes and lines because that's exactly how I saw them. So yeah, it was a symbology like this.
Hmm.
Yeah, thin lines and then thick lines. So those were the four characters that I was getting. Those were the four characters that I was going to write down, the
Hmm.
best way I could. And over time, the boxes and lines dissolved away. I stopped getting them. I've gotten quite a few messages in those boxes and lines, and quite a few have been translated. Not all of them have been translated because they were becoming a little bit too personal for me. And when things get a little too personal with family and things like that, then I tend to have to protect my family
Of
and
course.
and try not to let those get out. I mean, if it's meant for humanity, then I'm gonna share it. So I think I have like four or five in here of short little messages that I've gotten that I haven't translated yet. But they were going in a pattern that um, wasn't comfortable sharing with everyone. So eventually at some point I will look into getting those last few done just to see what they are and decide whether or not if I want to share that with everyone or not.
Well, the ones that you do have translated and that are, as you said, for humanity, what what are they telling you and how are you interpreting those?
They weren't telling me anything. They didn't tell me a damn thing. Excuse my language. No, they're just messages that I was writing down that I was
Right.
seeing. So they weren't telling me anything and until later down the road. So these squares and lines, they've gone away. Now I'm being spoken to in like a human language that I'm also writing,
Hmm.
those encounters down, word for word, how they transpire. But the messages that I was getting in the coded form, I was just articulate. I was just writing them down the way that I was I
Hmm.
was I was getting them. And when they were translated, that's there's messages in there. It's what Dr. Drew called multiplex binary format. It didn't exist before. This was something that he was able to figure out and he called it that. I mean, that was what he named it because it didn't exist. So it's a form of multi-layer binary or multiplexing binary. In other words, it was several different messages in one small form. You would need 2 pages of nothing but zeros and ones to convey uh, maybe even more, maybe 15, 16, 17 pages of zeros and ones to convey a short message. And the form of this type of binary, this multiplexing binary, um, you only need just a paragraph or so, or a half a page, or maybe a page, but you would get like, I don't know, pages upon pages of messaging and translation. So it was it was a kind of in reverse
Hmm.
format. You know what I mean? Um, where zeros and ones, you need 16, 15 pages for a paragraph of, understandable English language. Whereas this, you get like a big paragraph of the code, and you've gotten pages of pages of English language, translated. So that to me was baffling. But over time, I realized within the encounters that I'm having is that for some reason I'm seeing boxes, but what my encounters later conveyed is that these are in cubed form, meaning that, if you take a dice or a cube, every dice has a different number on it, right? So if you take that cube and you've put in a message on every single side of that cube, that's how these messages are
Yeah.
meant to be interpreted, is in a cubed form. And cubes are easy to move around, and we can do lots of fascinating things with buildable blocks, can't we?
Yeah.
We could build
Or
lots of different things.
do you have that first message you could share on what it said?
I don't I don't have it. I mean, I
Okay.
have what
Yeah.
I've written in my journal, but
Yeah.
what Dr. Drew has been done is, I didn't get the full message in one dream.
Right.
I don't get full messages in one dream. I'll get maybe, you know, 5 or 6 lines and then not have anything happen for like a week or two, and then I get another few lines. And so he combines all the lines into
Into
different
meaning.
messaging. And so some of them just they I don't even know if they're in the right format, because some of them just kind of
Hmm.
keep going and keep going. You can, if you put them all together, it would probably be just, several different. We don't know where the stop and end is because there's no periods. There's no dots. There's no, you know what I mean?
Right. So how
They're
do
not.
you
Yeah.
interpret these? Because that's one way is through the binary, but I think there's a link where all the messages are, which I'll include in the show notes. What does it mean for you as the receiver of these? What's the information you're receiving, and what do you think these messages are, and what do they mean?
Not entirely sure what the messages mean. I I I take the information as something is speaking, and I'm just relaying it somehow. So I don't 100% understand or align with everything about them. Um, I understand that in one of my translations, it discusses that um, there could be a threat upon humanity that may be, but I'm not sure what that threat is. I'm not sure if it's a what kind of threat. I mean, I'm not aligned 100%. And I know in one of my messages they identified themselves as the Emerthers, but in my encounters, most of them, they don't identify themselves with a name or a title, or what they're called. They don't tell me what they're called. So I can't 100% agree that's who I'm dealing with, is the Emerthers, because that's a message that I just conveyed from someone or something or someone else. So it's not coming from me, and I can't say that's 100% what it is. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So for me, it's like hearing something translated that you've written down that I've written down from something else. So it's hard for me to completely align with what they are, because in my encounters, like I said, they didn't identify themselves as emerthers, um, but they could very well be. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah.
human error is a real thing, and
Yeah. So I'm curious though, this has been really meaningful for you personally,
yes.
and so let's talk about that of what you've gotten and what your interpretation of as you've encountered these beings. And I think there's been what, four different kind of beings that you've encountered. Do I have that right?
No, I've encountered tall grays. I've encountered tall humanoid, um, females and males, that a lot of people associate with like Nordics or tall whites or something. I've uh, I've encountered short grays, and I've encountered these short female species, and And it's weird that it's always these short female species, but then over time I realized that they're part of who I'm encountering, and they're part of this little group that I've had contact with. But and their species, where they're from, the male DNA has been is not working well. They're not producing males at a an effective pace. There's been some sort of damage to the male DNA where they're from, and so females are able to exist, but males have either died before birth, died shortly after birth, or suffering from major birth defects and things like that. So whatever happened on their planet or wherever they're from, the male DNA, it's been damaged in some way, and so that's why I'm always encountering, with this one particular species, it's always short, 3.5 feet tall females, about the same size as the small grays. They're about the same height, but they're extreme looking. The only difference is they tend to have a larger mouth, opening for a mouth, larger jaw, and wider eye sockets. They have wider eyes, larger eyes than ours. But everything else very proportionate to us. Their heads are about the same size as us. I would say they have a little bit more of a bulge in the back, or rounded back end. But other than that, they look almost identical to us, besides the eye features, the mouth features, and maybe a little bit on the back of the head.
Do they have hair?
They have hair, yeah, different colored hair, blonde, brown, red,
Mhm.
wavy, curly, straight. They have features that we would consider like, with human beings, we all don't look alike. We have different skin tones, very different skin color. We have ethnic differences that we as humans identify with different cultures. Like Southeast Asian, Northern, Middle Eastern, and you have all these different cultures around the world, and those help us identify different characteristics of where our ancestors, or where we're from. So with this particular species, it's very similar. I mean, I have not seen a vast amount of change, because I've only encountered a few of them, but I have noticed some slightly Asian appearance and looks of these short females. I've seen some with blonde hair, some with brunette, some red hair, some black. But there is, I've only encountered a few of them, throughout time, so it could be more. There could be more out there that I'm not aware of. I just know from what I've seen, and I keep what I see inside my little box of my factual things that I've encountered. So yeah, that's how I interpret things.
So, what do you feel like is the intention of these beings? Are they here for our benefit? Are they here for their own benefit? Are they here for harm? What is it that you feel like is happening on a broader scale?
The ones that I primarily have been encountering, they're here for multiple purposes. They're here to improve themselves, and they're here to improve us. They're wanting us to improve. They're wanting us to evolve. They're wanting us to awaken. And so they're doing what they can to preserve human life, preserve human way of life, and evolve safely and effectively. The ones that I've encountered, but I have encountered some negative species as well. But there, there's good and bad, and with the species that I've encountered, they're very similar to us. The small grays. There are some that are super, that are very understanding of human emotional state, and so they're more kind, they're more gentle. they're more calming. Then there are some that are very technical. They're very good at their job, but humans are kind of an annoyance why they're doing it. So they're agitated. So you have different personalities with each species. And though the species themselves are meaning well, not all of them behave the exact same way as the others. They all have different personalities, just like we do here on Earth. So there might be some that are a little bit more emotionally, comforting, and then some that are going to be a little bit more, um, rough or what's the word I'm looking for? Rough around the edges, a little bit more um, focused on their particular tasks. They're not very interested in humans. They're just there to do their job, kind of thing. So I mean, you're going to have different personalities. They're just as clumsy as us. I've seen them bump into things. I've seen them drop things. They're all of them are that way. They all have their own little personalities, their own little um, gifts, I would say, or what they're good at, what they're not good at.
Mhm.
You know, and I've
And
shoved one pretty hard once
oh yeah.
because he was just being a little too aggressive with my left arm, and I shoved him against the wall, and he was a little pissed. I don't care. I was angry. Stop yanking on me, and I shoved it. I mean, it was a long time ago, but it was just one of those things that you know um, I'm going to protect myself no matter what. And
Yeah.
that's the way we all should be. We all should, we're here to live our lives and go after what we want to go after in life. And um, we have to protect ourselves no matter, what side of the park we're on.
Yeah.
We have to protect ourselves.
Hey, so there's a lot here, and I want to kind of tease out some things. There's a couple of
Okay.
things. So one is you said they're here to preserve us. Is that here to preserve us genetically? Is that here to preserve our way of life? Is that here to preserve humanity? What does that actually mean? What are they here to help us do?
So the ones that I've encountered mostly, they're here out of good purposes. They're trying to improve themselves, but they're also trying to improve us. They're trying to make sure that we're evolving, that we're becoming good, I guess, future allies, future trading partners,
So is this
future
evolving spiritually
working,
and emotionally and
right? Yeah,
becoming more of who a good person would
awakened.
be, awakened?
They keep saying the word awakened to me, and evolving. Evolve, so I keep hearing evolve, I keep hearing awaken, I keep hearing progression. So this is they're wanting us to progress and evolve and become friends and become allies, become
Mhm.
trading partners, become good species that can work with them later down the road. um, there are some species out there that uh, they're building their technology, they're building their way of life off of negativity and violence. They're using us as a food source, or they're using us for our commodities. They're abusing uh, the human species because we're the weakest, that are around right now. So there are negative species out there that uh, don't have our best interest. Um, they,
Have
they
you
may be
ever
trading with us. They may
have
be
you ever
trading with us,
have you ever
but
encountered them?
I have encountered them right after this trip in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We witnessed one night right outside of our window, three that were coming up with negative intent, and I had to protect. It was one of those that I had locked all the doors, shut all the windows, and mentally made a threat that if you come in, that things were going to get very violent. I was going to protect my family no matter what, and they disappeared. But I felt the negative intent. They were coming to take away whatever was given to me during that trip, or to remove it, or collect the information. They wanted the information, um, and I was doing what I could to protect my family and protect it. And so I did have an encounter. That was just that one encounter, but I have also been aware that there are negative species out there that are willing to trade with us for technology But, in return, we have to do some very bad things. We have to, we have to give them a food source, which may be us. I'm not quite for sure. And these are thoughts, ideas, and opinions. Don't take this to the bank. I'm human. I can make mistakes. So these are just my ideas, my thoughts, and my opinions.
But these are what
I'm
you
not
have
saying none
dev
of this is fact. This is just I don't want anybody to take, what I'm saying seriously, because I can't prove it.
yeah.
I hope I am a little bit off on some of this stuff, but in my thoughts that there are negative species out there that are developing technology, based on fear, violence, chaos, death, and they're willing to trade technology with us in order to achieve the things that they want. And the things that they want are not in our best interest in the long run. And so, yeah, we have to stand up against things like that. If there's a species out there wanting us to improve, then when the time is right, we can trade technology, things like that. Once we're mature enough to be able to handle that type of stuff. I mean, I'm sure right now we probably have 0 point energy. More than likely, we've had 0 point energy for quite some time. We've had, anti-gravity, materials and engines, I would imagine, for quite some time. But is that information getting out to the public? Are we able to use that to reduce fossil fuels in our power grids and things like that? No, it's not being used for that. So what's the purpose of having it if you're not using it for the better of humanity? If you're not helping people with it, then you're using it for selfish and greedy purposes. You're hoarding the technology, you're hoarding the all of that from humanity. You're not doing humanity any favors. And so, yeah, I feel in my opinion that that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so it's disappointing to hear.
Is that what messages you feel like you've received? That that's information that you feel like you're getting from them that's helping you know this is what's going on in your and this is how you're interpreting it. So you're not saying this is for sure or fact, but this is how you're interpreting what they're sharing with you.
This is how I'm interpreting the information, and I'm borrowing these thoughts and ideas from the factual things that I keep in the box. I keep my encounters, the actual messages that I received, inside the box of my evidence. Now I take some of those thoughts, some of those messages that I received and ideas that I received and encounters that I received that I keep in the box. I borrow some of those ideas to think of what the meaning of that could be. And I come up with, different theories and ideas. That doesn't necessarily, these ideas are correct. I'm human. I make mistakes. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying this is the way it is. These are just my thoughts. And you can agree with them, you can disagree with them. That's fine.
Yeah.
We have that freedom of thought and freedom of idea, and we were supposed to share it with others.
Right.
It's not about, I have to be right, so believe me. No, it's more or less like, these are my thoughts and my ideas. What do you think of them? I mean,
Yeah.
am I right or am I wrong? Do you disagree? Do you agree? It doesn't matter. We have
Yeah.
that free will to decide for ourselves,
Right. I will
right?
invite, and I just want to kind of point out it's not like you've studied UFOs or been a student of that. This is all based off your experience, right?
Right, right. When these things were happening when I was younger, UFOs, aliens were not supposed to be talked about. So no, of course, I didn't get involved in UFOs. I
Yeah.
wasn't a researcher in any of that stuff. It started happening when I came clean about the encounter from Georgia to Colorado Springs, and I brought it up because I was finally, nobody was telling me I couldn't do it or I
Hmm.
couldn't talk about it. So I shared it. I felt like it didn't belong to me, it belonged to the world. And, people need to know about this. It's happening to other people. And so it was important for me to share it. And for so long after that, because I didn't use my real name, it ate at me and ate at me that I need to be honest and upfront with who I am and stop hiding behind, this CJ or Sergeant CJ. But in my defense, I had children to raise. I
Of
didn't want them
course.
harassed in school. I was still active duty. I was trying to protect, the information to create chaos in my career and my job. I retired. I worked, and you mentioned JB Management. I was working at JB Management with Lockheed Martin out of Syracuse, New York, and I worked with Constellas. I worked with some other defense contracts, but I wasn't ready to come out, and so I decided I think I'm done with the defense contracting
Yeah.
stuff. I'm ready to come out and be honest with those um, with who I am, not hide behind anything. And it felt better coming out with not hiding behind the CJ and having my voice altered in interviews
Hmm.
and having just a dark shadow of me because that was silly. I didn't want to be that type of person. It's more humble and more honest if it
Yeah.
comes from someone you're able to stand behind yourself, with who you are. And so yeah, it was time for me to just come
Yeah.
clean with it. Yeah.
Well, and I'm grateful you did. And one of the things I just want to point out, we're not going to get into it here because this is not a conspiracy theory podcast. But if you look into UFOs, I have kind of, I won't say been a researcher, but I have been following this, learning about it for since I was 6, right? So I have some awareness, and there are rabbit holes you can go down that kind of discuss some of the things that you just shared. And so, I don't know what is reality either, and I'm not pushing that, and I'm certainly not pushing the fear narrative because I do think this is all about us evolving. And this is why the podcast is evolving reality, right? And so becoming the human potential piece of that and the spiritual piece of that and the technology piece of that and the science piece of that, to me it's all connected as we you know are evolving in this moment. So you brought in, we had discussed before the call started, before we hit record, you were kind of bringing in that element, this connected piece. What does that mean to you?
We're talking more spiritually and consciousness level.
Hmm.
Okay. So what that means to me, and I'm not an expert at this. I'm beginning to understand, just slowly beginning to learn this myself. So bear with me and my rudimentary way of speaking about it, but I'm going to do my best. You got to think military dude trying to, express things in a spiritual and this level. It's not my forte, but I'm going to do my best. So I have noticed, stop talking to me.
Is
There's
that your
a
dog?
no, this is my daughter-in-law's guinea pig just he's screaming.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So what I have noticed over time is that I tend to have more encounters when I'm in a positive state of mind.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is, previously we discussed that, our bodies produce electricity, our bodies produce photons, and we're essentially like an antenna or amplifier. And what I was getting at is that when I'm in a positive state of mind, when I have an emotional connection with my partner and we're sharing intimate moments together, it doesn't happen right away, but usually, a day or so after we would share an intimate moment, we would have a very powerful um, moment at times. And those are been the most powerful moments that I've had, where I completely feel like I had been on the vessel or having some serious encounters with
mm,
longer periods of time. And I don't know why that is and why that's happening that way. I don't understand it. Now I have had encounters where things haven't been intimate, but my mind was in the right state of mind. I would have very short moments of encounters, very short experiences in I would say on a consciousness level, when I was in a good frame of mind. When I'm thinking, peaceful thoughts, when I'm thinking of nature, when I'm wishing nothing but good for everyone, when I'm thinking positive of humanity, positive of other people, even people that I don't agree with, that I don't care for too much. It's, if you keep your mindset, well, like I hope that person eventually, finds their way and has success. You could have people that hate your guts and want to do harm upon you, but when you can sit back and think about it, and he's like, I hope they find what they're looking for and find some peace in their life. They're not so hateful to others and we're not so violent with others. When you think positively for somebody who thinks negatively upon you, you are bringing upon a positive energy about yourself, and you're able to have some quite intriguing encounters and information that's shared with you. And I think throughout history we've recognized this. Um, no, we before we started this, we just you and I shared a moment where we talked about angels and demons, right? So when you look back in history, this was in ancient Egypt and Greece and places all around the world. At one point in time, human beings worshipped many different gods. They worshiped the harvest god, the moon god, the sun god, all these, the god of fertility, the god of the underworld. They had all these different gods that they worshipped. But that was back then when that started taking place. That was one of our awakening moments. That was one of the moments that was meant to awaken us, but we as human beings, we misinterpreted things and we kind of went off on the deep end. We took a little bit of that information and we found a way to profit from it. So if you have back in those times, if you had a temple dedicated to the moon god, you had your followers go in and pay tribute to the moon god. Well, now you're collecting money, you're collecting, financial gain, and you're controlling people in some way. So we as human beings make mistakes a lot, often. And so back then, it was the wrong way of thinking. And, it took some time for another awakening to happen where they came back and said, no, you are doing this wrong. You shouldn't be worshiping all of these gods. There is only one. There is only one creator. And so that was another awakening moment where we decided we'll get rid of all these other gods because they're not all gods. Some of them are bad, some of them are good. So we need to focus on just the one. And it was just like a sudden shift throughout the world where we all started worshiping that one God. Well, we as human beings, we can't get right sometimes. We make mistakes and we start doing things out of greed and we start doing things to control people and we have that hunger for power. So what transpired after that? Well, that's where religion started popping up. That's where several different religions started popping up. And this was humans' way. These are human beings' way of controlling population. Um, that need for control and power and that greed, you know, wealth. And when you combine those three things, you're creating an organization to better yourself out of creating these religions. And so religions were never supposed to take place, to be honest with you. I don't think religions were ever supposed to exist. And I think we were all supposed to be worshiped or speaking to or had the ability to speak to the creator himself, which we call God. We never needed a religion,
Mhm.
to donate our money to go and seek these religious pastors and preachers and get blessings for things. You always had the ability to speak to the creator and get those blessings yourself. And I don't think religions should have ever existed. In my personal opinion now, after these encounters, this is where I'm at. That doesn't mean that I'm right. And that doesn't mean that I'm wrong. And I could very well be wrong. And I'm completely open and okay with that. There's nothing wrong with, getting the wrong answer to a math test. There's nothing wrong with a theory or thought or idea of being wrong. But I'm going to be honest and share it.
Yeah.
If it's a thought, it's an idea that I'm kind of correlating out of this. I don't think religions were ever supposed to exist. Now, I'm not saying religions are bad by any means. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying that I'm saying that if they're meant for good purposes, if they're meant for humble and they're meant for goodness and humanity, if these religions are accepting of other cultures, other beliefs, other religious styles, and they can live in harmony within one another, then essentially they are meaningful and good. I'm not saying religions are bad. What I'm saying is when a religion pushes negativity and violence and chaos upon others, then it's not a good religion. It's not a, you're in something very, very bad, and you need to separate yourself from that. You need to find goodness and kindness and love for your brothers and sisters all around the world. We are one human being. Um, no matter what, country we're from, what ethnic background we are, what beliefs we have, we should be looking out for one another, helping one another, because that's how we evolve as a human race, is being good and kind to one another, solving those difficult problems in life so that we can progress in life and pass those on to our children to do the same. So violence and chaos is just it's a form of evil. It's a form of negativity, and that's bad energy. And we don't need the bad energy. We need the good energy.
As we wrap up and as we're listening to this, I want to leave the listeners with something tangible. So we may have people who maybe their experiences, or maybe they're afraid of these other species and what that may mean for them individually, or just they're just afraid, or they're just afraid of what's going on in the world right now. What would your guidance or advice or suggestion be for how to move through all of this with discernment, or that our own finding our own connection, or whatever that guidance is? What would you leave people with?
What I would leave people with is those of us who have had encounters, and not just me, anyone around the world who has an encounter or has a contact or an abduction experience with another species. Yes, um, sometimes they can be scary. They can look very scary. Sometimes you're going to feel some pain in those encounters, but don't assume because something looks scary and you feel a little pain that that is a negative encounter or bad encounter. We have to take things for what they are. We cannot allow our religious beliefs take over. We can't use that as our lifeline. Well, I don't know how to explain this, so I'm going to use my religion to explain it. Well, that's not the best way to think through issues and problems, or to try to find solutions to problems. We have to be a little smarter with our critical thinking. If they took a little DNA from me, and yes, they were scary looking, I leave it as that. Yes, they're scary looking, and they took a little DNA from me. But guess what? I'm still living. I still have a family. I still have my life. I'm still surviving. So it could not be that bad, the DNA from me. Who knows what that blood or DNA was used for? That could have been used somewhere around the globe where someone's something, and that little bit of DNA could have saved someone's life. Or that little bit of DNA went to a whole nother planet, another solar system, where it saved a whole nother species. You don't know what that's being used for. And if you don't know what that's being used for, you can't assume that it's bad. And so, what I ask people when they have encounters, don't be quick to jump to conclusions and jump to quick answers. And I'm not saying that everything is good, but I'm also saying not everything is bad either. So use our critical thinking, and don't let those religious beliefs jump in the way of things. Think outside of the box. And we're smart human beings, and we have the ability to find ways to think through problems and solutions. We are very adaptive people, and that's what makes us special. There are so many creative people around the world, and so many people with absolutely beautiful, beautiful gifts. And so I recommend everyone use those gifts and use your critical thinking, and don't allow things to interfere with those thoughts and ideas, and find a solution without going to a lifeline of religious beliefs or demonic beliefs, or don't be suckered into something else. Use your own mind first, and before you make a decision such as that. Don't assume that it's demonic because you were raised Catholic, or you were raised Christian or Muslim, or whatever belief you have. Don't use that as your lifeline. Use your critical. You have a mind and a gift. Use that first, and not allow anything else to step in.
I love that. This has been amazing conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours, Jeremy, and I so appreciate what you shared. Is there anything else that you didn't feel like you got to say that you want to make sure that you communicate?
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit, and if anyone has knows me, they'll know that I can talk for hours and hours. And if any of you out there sat through 4 hours of my interview with Chris Ramsey, I still had plenty more to talk about. So I
Yeah,
mean, of course, I could talk all day long, but we're going to keep things shorter this time. We're going to keep things a little bit
yeah.
geared in, and we'll just have more of these conversations. And there's
And
nothing wrong with that.
I'll put links to the Chris Ramsey and Linda Moulton Howell's, interviews, because you go way in detail in the encounters, and so people who want more than the light coverage that we did today can really go into that June event and really hear kind of step by step as it goes along, and it's pretty profound. So I highly recommend people go and listen to that as well if they're intrigued at all. So you've got some pretty exciting things coming up. Do you want to share us about what's coming on, or where people can find you, or how can they follow you?
You can follow me by my Instagram. Do you have my? I don't even know what my Instagram name
I'll put
is
it
or
in the
how
show
it.
notes.
Yeah,
I'll
let's
put,
put it in there.
yeah,
I'm kind of the old ball-headed crunchy dude, so I'm not really great with that social media stuff, and I absolutely am horrible on Facebook. I just got a Facebook, and I have no idea. I need somebody to help me with that eventually down the line. But right now, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a YouTube, just for interviews that I just kind of add to it. And I have an Instagram that I don't really update very often, but I'm on it all the time chatting with people. So, the best way to reach me is YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn
okay,
currently.
great.
But yes,
And
I'm working, and yeah, I'm working with an executive producer right now. We are working toward a TV docuseries that will delve into a lot of the stuff. And we've gotten some a really amazing list of great, talented people um, that we have just brought on board, and we're still adding to. So as things progress, stay tuned. But we'll share that information as we push forward.
I can't wait. I will definitely be tuning in, and hopefully you'll come back and talk to us once that comes out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It has been an honor and a privilege to talk with you. I'm grateful for the time and energy that you have provided today, and hopefully people found this useful as they navigate this evolving reality. So I want to thank my editor, music producer, and all-in-one support team, Cassie Frankovich. Without her, this podcast would not be. And if you're still here, please like, subscribe, and review so more people can join us. This is Evolving Reality. Until next time, stay curious.
Thank you, Hannah.
Evolving Reality is created and hosted by Hanna Goss as a part of Hanna Goss Coaching. Music and production support are by Cassie Frankovich. The views and experiences shared are those of the individual guests and are presented to encourage thoughtful exploration and open dialogue. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or any affiliated individuals or organizations. This podcast is intended to create a space where evidence, experience, and curiosity can coexist. Listeners are encouraged to think critically, do their own research, and come to their own conclusions. Nothing shared on this podcast should be considered medical, psychological, legal, financial, or professional advice. Thank you for exploring with us.